Howdy, Dennis Bradford here. Let's think some about being, feeling, and doing better.
How is it possible to drop attachments? Let's review some of the chief ideas I presented so far in this playlist. Successfully dropping attachments is the result of mastering any classic spiritual practice, such as aliveness awareness. As I discuss in the next video, this is what sages have been saying for many, many centuries. So, there's nothing new about the goal. The question is how to do it. The result of doing it completely is the kind of freedom that only sages enjoy. It's not necessary, again, to become a sage to enjoy freedom from the prolonged affliction that comes from the worst unwanted emotions, such as fear, anger, guilt, grief, and shame. The practices used to promote freedom from unwanted emotions are spiritual practices, which are bodily practices. As a reminder, in video 9 of the Stress Reduction Wizardry playlist, I explain how to do aliveness awareness. It's a stilling bodily practice in which attention is directed upon and sustained upon the aliveness energy in one's body. As a reminder, in video 11 in that playlist, I explain how to do Zazen. It's a stilling bodily practice in which attention is initially directed upon one's inhalations and exhalations, one's breathing. Also, in previous videos in this emotional empowerment playlist, I've explained identity 2-in-1 judgments, in which what appear to be two different forms are taken to be one entity, existent form. Again, the foundations of all our conceptual systems are made from primitive identity judgments. We make identity judgments all the time. For example, I've seen her before is really an identity judgment such as, the woman I'm seeing now is the woman I saw before. So, although the terminology about identity judgments may be unfamiliar to you, you in fact use positive and negative identity judgments daily. To think is to make judgments, to conceptualize, to classify. We each have thousands of thoughts daily. Some of those thoughts are judgments about situations we apprehend. When those situations are taken to be relevant to us, we think of them as either good for us or bad for us. Incessant evaluative judgments are the bane of our lives. When their intensity is sufficiently high, we've seen how this is good for me is the core of every positive emotion, and how this is bad for me is the core of every negative emotion. Without thoughts, there are no emotions. Emotions are built from thoughts. Obviously then, thoughts influence emotions. Also, emotions influence thoughts. For example, the more we think about some distressing situation, the more emotionally upset we become. We can get stuck in a vicious cycle of thoughts intensifying an emotion and an emotion intensifying thoughts. Furthermore, typically, unwanted thoughts are layered upon each other. That's the short version of how we get stuck in prolonged emotional distress. If that quick review is insufficient, please re-watch the previous videos in this playlist. So, let's suppose that you are afflicted with some powerful unwanted emotion. You may even be so distressed that you have suicidal thoughts. It's too late for you to do anything but fully accept it. Use either the emotional humility or the peacefulness process method to dissolve it. How, in the future, can you drop attachment to the kinds of thoughts that are critical to the formation of powerful unwanted emotions? That brings us to the chief new idea of this video. It's called witnessing. When we're attached, we can come to enjoy non-attachment only by detaching. Witnessing is the way we detach. Witnessing is disidentification. The critical idea is that we stop identifying with unwanted emotions. That quickly dissipates their power. We stop thinking, for example, I'm grief-stricken about my child's death. We stop thinking the thoughts that are critical to the formation of powerful unwanted emotions, In particular, this is bad for me. So we stop suffering from unwanted emotions. They dissolve. This is much more difficult in practice than in theory. Why? It's almost certain that you've spent your whole life so far identifying with your thoughts and emotions. That's a bad habit that all sages break. Would you like to be wise? Again, you are not your emotions. Emotions come and go, but you don't. Whenever you are emotionally neutral, perfectly peaceful, it's you who are peaceful, isn't it? Similarly, again, on those, perhaps infrequent, occasions when you have found yourself aware, yet without thinking, it's you who are enjoying no thought, isn't it? You're not your thoughts. Yes, you certainly experience thoughts and emotions, but they are not you. If you are not your thoughts and emotions, if you are not your experiences, who are you? Excellent question. Notice that to ask it, you had to step back mentally from your thoughts and emotions. You're still here. You're the one who is experiencing the thoughts and emotions. You're the experiencer. You are the witness. You are the witnessing consciousness, awareness, presence. That's your true identity. This is why I've suggested that you seriously ask, who am I? And not refer to anything in the past or future. The idea is to step back permanently from all your thoughts and emotions. This is what sages do all the time. They withdraw all the relevant identity judgments. They disidentify with all their thoughts, emotions, and other experiences. You make the identity judgments, and so you can unmake them. Here's Eckhart Tolle, for example, from The Power of Now. Quote, "Make it your practice to start by observing the habitual tendency of your mind to want to escape from the now. The moment you realize you are not present, you are present. Be present as the watcher of your mind, the still observing presence itself behind the content of your mind, the silent watcher," end quote. Similarly, David Hawkins in Power versus Force, quote, "By observation and introspection, one can witness that thoughts have no capacity to experience themselves. Consciousness itself is not determined by content," end quote. In Letting Go, quote, "We first have to be aware of what is really going on inside of us before we can do anything about it," end quote. In The Eye of the Eye, quote, "Presence is always present," end quote. Quote, "Spiritual work, therefore, is primarily a letting go," end quote. Working on yourself is primarily detaching, disidentifying, releasing, dropping all the contents of consciousness. Also, from The Eye of the Eye, quote, "The world is neither good nor bad. Its appearance is only a projection of one's own mind. No such world exists," end quote. This does not entail that thinking is useless in becoming. Of course it's useful. It does entail, however, that thinking is, quote, "a limitation and a great barrier to enlightenment," end quote. Witnessing is how it's possible to drop attachments. It's critical to realize that witnessing is not thinking. It's just awareness. You are the awareness. That's your essence, your whatness. It's false that your essence is thinking. How can you prove this to yourself? The idea is simply to become aware of the contents of consciousness, the passing parade of forms. While forms are incessantly moving, the awareness is itself still. These are important stimulating ideas. More about them in following videos. Let's end emotional distress.